think we might start with the recording of Enrico. I reminded him that we first met 25 years ago. He was the new Italian Europe minister, and I was trying to get a new think tank called Friends of Europe off the ground, which was the idea behind Friends of Europe was I didn't want Brussels to be boring, because European integration had been so successful up to the end of the 20th century that it was really the Brussels bubble congratulating itself on its progress, and I felt that was a bad thing. So let's start, if we can, with the clip of Enrico Letta asking my question, what went wrong in the 25 years since he and I first met? Because things were really going full steam ahead. We just got the euro, Big Bang enlargement coming, a single market sort of completed. And now we're in the doldrums. So I asked him, what went wrong?
I think the main point is the fact that we didn't integrated the main topics of the economic, linked to the economic competitiveness in the same time in which we integrated the euro and we created the euro. My true point is the fact that during the European Economic and Monetary Union process, we stressed the M and we didn't stress the E, so the Economic Union. So we were very much focused on the monetary union. All the energy efforts were put on the monetary side. It was a success, and it is a success. It has been a great success, and we have to underline the success, because I remember vividly the fact that 20 years ago, the opposition to the creation of the euro was very strong, was very high, and today 75% of European citizens are happy with the euro. Yes. And the euro today is perceived as the umbrella, and the storm is not the euro. The storm is not Europe. The storm is the globalization, the acceleration of globalization, is China and the rest. The euro is the umbrella. And today, this perception is shared by the European citizens. What we didn't do at that time was to consider that it's impossible to have a successful monetary union without having the same process in the main sectors of competitiveness. This is why I can tell you, Gilles, that my most interesting part of the exercise of writing the report on the single market and presenting and discussing on the ground the report, the preparation and la prévente of the report was I would say, my surprise of the surprise. My surprise of the lack of awareness around Europe that in reality the single market is half a single market. Because on telecommunications, on energy, on financial services, we have 27 markets. And the awareness of that is absolutely not complete in Europe. People think that the single market exists because we have the euro, and euro is a strong symbol. And so people are convinced that we have also the rest of the single market, but we don't. And this big contradiction, this paradox, in my view, is the true problem we have. And we have to work on it with very pragmatic solutions. And this is exactly the exercise that I try to propose.
Excellent. Let me now turn to Bruno Tobback, who I think needs no introduction to a Belgian audience and has been involved in European politics for a long time as part of almost a family tradition. But Bruno, let me ask you, is the question correct? Has anything gone wrong? Or are we just looking at the normal development of a very complex European cooperative mechanism?
Well, I'm not sure if you can say that things necessarily went wrong. What did happen is that a lot of things changed while we were not paying attention. And that what Enrico Letta says is completely correct. We made a monetary union without any instruments to have a joint strategic economic policy. Marc said there we need to compete with others. Europe has actually never been designed to compete with other global powers. It has been designed to more or less mitigate competition between European countries from becoming military, aggressive, or even unfair competition. Europe was an inward-looking process, and we have failed to notice a number of changes. We talk about Donald Trump being a threat to Europe. Actually, what is the real threat to Europe is not Donald Trump. It's older than the first Donald Trump mandate. It is the fact that, for example, the United States have become a net energy exporter, which means also that we are no longer their ally when it comes to providing cheap, affordable, accessible fossil fuel from, for example, the Middle East. They were our partners ever since World War II in guaranteeing that strategic commodity. They are not now, because they are sellers, just like the Saudis are, just like Russia was. And we forgot to mention, and we forgot to notice that changes fundamentally our position as Europe. Combined with the fact that we were free riding on a geopolitical situation where we were natural allies and very useful for the United States in the old Cold War, where Russia and Russian communism was the opposition. In the current Cold War or hot war with China, we are no longer as relevant to the United States as we were. So we are on our own. And we're not ready for being on our own, for looking that into the face and checking what is it that we need to do. The energy transition is a very beautiful example, because we have indeed the European political community. We also have an energy community. I was at the General Assembly last week. It doesn't include the UK, but it does include all the Eastern European Balkan countries, where you can see that we are not ready to come to a common. We have a huge common interest for integrating networks, providing energy, which we are doing to Ukraine, for example, right now. But we are not ready to design a common policy. And we are also not noticing, at least not in the general public, that we are already, when it comes to energy policy, under siege. Maybe not under attack, but under siege. I've come from a debate on, for example, lithium mining in Europe. There is, in Eastern Europe, Serbia and the Czech Republic, there are a number of lithium mine projects that are being actively undermined, to use the phrase, no pun intended, by political influence from probably Russia, posing as environmental NGOs, trying to, in a very aggressive way, block lithium mining projects in the European Union that might support the European battery industry and the transition. It is both a political and an economical war that we are really not facing, and most people, probably in Belgium, don't even realize this is going on. So I think we are getting aware of that, growing into an awareness that we need to deal with that we need to tackle that we need to face it, start to in the first place. But we don't yet have any common understanding, any realization among the public, any narrative about how we need to do that. We are still talking about an energy transition as if it is for climate change and for the planet. It has long ceased to be about climate change. It has become a strategic necessity to do that energy transition, to become autonomous from fossil fuels, for example. Because if you can choose between buying them from Donald Trump on the one hand or Vladimir Putin on the other hand, you have every interest of weaning yourself off that and finding another solution and a better one. So we need to really rephrase a lot of the narrative on our economic and political reality.
Thanks very much. I want to turn now to David O'Sullivan. who I've known for an awfully long time and who has occupied just about every senior job in the sort of European institutions. And there's a risk that David is going to be drawn by Bruno's last remarks into talking about sanctions against Russia, because he's in charge of that particular part of EU policy. But while I wouldn't stop you doing that, David, I also want to remind you of the question, what went wrong? Because for my money, what has gone wrong is that we are stuck with political mechanisms in the European Union that make our decision-making too slow, too difficult. And at the same time, we know that changing the treaties to speed things up and improve them is not on the cards. What went wrong?
Well, I don't think anything went wrong. I think what we have are three things which have not developed in the way we perhaps originally thought or the way we would have wished. The first is what Enrico Letta said. It's the economic side. The single market project. I mean, when I started in the Commission in 1979, the place was moribund. I spent 4 years in Tokyo looking at trade issues with Japan. When I came back in '85 to join the Delors Commission, there was a sense of, exactly as we say today, that we'd fallen behind, that we couldn't catch up, we were never going to regain our economic position. We had the 1992 project, Maastricht, and so forth, monetary union. So we did actually rebound, and we rebuilt a much stronger European economy on the back of the single market. But as Enrico said, we failed to complete it. We have not got a full single market, and most importantly, for today's problems, we don't have a financial union, a finance union. 70% of funding of European industry is from banks. 30% is from liquid capital. In the United States, it's the opposite way around. Most of our startups, and we have lots of startups, are selling themselves out to US capital when they get to be worth 25, 30 million, because they can't get venture capital investment in Europe. And we don't have a European venture capital market. We absolutely need that as an urgency. The other thing that happened, I'm afraid, in that context was, you will remember, Giles, very well the debate about, the single market, yes, but we needed accompanying measures. We needed the environment. We needed social policy. We needed workers' rights. I agree with all of that. But unfortunately, as we went through much of the 21st century, we focused more on those things than we did on completing the single market. So we lost industry. I mean, that's the reality. Industry was a huge advocate for closer integration, for more Europe. Industry now sees Europe as a mixed blessing, because they also see it as a huge source of additional regulation and so forth. So we didn't manage to marry the need for those accompanying measures to make sure that the welfare of ordinary workers and people was improved also by the single market, but we didn't balance that with the needs of industry. And that's why we have today an issue of competitiveness. Linked to that is what Bruno has said about energy. I mean, we are exposed in the world of energy today by the fact that the Americans are now net exporters. We are no longer importing from Russia, quite rightly so, but we are still a net importer of energy. We're a continent with no natural energy source. So we are dependent. The price of energy in Europe is too high, and we are driving investment out of Europe, particularly towards America. We need to address this. One of the ways is by completing the energy grid. We don't actually have a fully integrated. So again, we don't have a single market in energy. So we need to do all these things. The second thing that, in my view, went wrong that we need to be politically conscious of is the rule of law, democracy, and the consequences of the enlargement of 2004, which I'm absolutely in favor of. I worked very hard with Romano Prodi and everyone in the Commission at that time to achieve it. But we have to admit that we never planned for the possibility that some countries would go backwards. And we are now in a situation where this is an active problem and we don't know how to deal with it. And this is very damaging for the view of Europe in public opinion. And this is contributing to a lack of confidence in the European institutions and their ability to be a renewed center of power. The third thing which has changed, of course, is the global context. The growing isolationism of America, we had that in Trump 1. If we look, President Biden, who was a huge ally of Europe on the Russia issue and Ukraine issue, but economically he didn't change much from President Trump. And now we have Mr. Trump back in force with an increased mandate and an ever more isolationist agenda. And we are, as Bruno has said, we are on our own, and we have to figure out how we better provide for our own security, how we secure our own future and don't outsource that, as I think Marc said in his book, to the United States. And in this context, of course, the war in Ukraine, Russia's aggression, is a key moment in deciding because we are engaged in a civilizational struggle with Russia for who writes the rules of the 21st century in Europe. Is it the law of the jungle, the power of the biggest country, or is it a rules-based, logical, peaceful structure? And that's why we cannot, the struggle against Russia, of course, first and foremost, it's for the freedom of Ukraine, but it's also for defining the rules of engagement in the 21st century. And that's why I'm not going to talk about the sanctions now. I'm happy to do so. But I mean, the sanctions are a very important part of how we push back. But military assistance to Ukraine is very important, macroeconomic assistance to Ukraine, and political assistance offering the perspective of membership and so forth. They're all part of an integrated policy. But this is really a struggle that we cannot lose. If we lose this struggle, all the rest that we're talking about, in my view, will not be worth it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Marc, David has just listed a whole lot of things that need to be done. It's a sort of political to-do list. And when you were talking earlier, presenting the book, you have said, for you, the glass is half full. But David's to-do list is, in fact, a reflection of a political problem. The political climate has deteriorated. European voters are no longer as committed, as powerfully committed as they were to European integration for a whole series of reasons. I asked that question to Enrico, come in a minute, but if you'd like to tell me, the glass is half full, but political change is coming.
Well, the fact that we are voicing what we are voicing tonight, we have two insiders saying that it's absolutely necessary to do. And we have all these reports, we've never had that. These three major reports at once, we've never had that. So there's a lot of momentum being built up, I think, into the system. Of course, politics is hard, and it's not getting any easier given the state of democracy worldwide. And that is the same with us in Europe. I think that we can learn from the mistakes of the past. So the mistakes of the past, what went wrong? We had the monetary union that wasn't fulfilled. We failed to complete it when we had the opportunity in the euro crisis. So grasping the opportunity of a crisis is, I think, the key lesson to learn. And it's the age-old wisdom of the founding fathers of the EU. Say it comes through crisis, where you can create political coalition. That, of course, means also leadership. I think what went wrong is that we probably were a bit unlucky in terms of who is in charge of some of the most important countries at a particular moment in European history. And I'm not even mentioning Brexit. If Brexit had not happened, which was a close call and so on and so forth, and you can also make that as a key question of what went wrong, because that was a divorce coming from both sides, I think. Anyway, so the citizen, Europe has never done more for the average citizen in the past couple of years. The pandemic, peace, energy security in wartime, managing the shock of deglobalization, and so on and so forth. How many domestic politicians made Europe a positive priority during the recent European elections? I think in Western Europe, you really would have to look for them. Macron gave a speech in the Sorbonne, but that was a Macron speech. In any event, he was not running for anything. But I say it again because I've had the pleasure of being invited in a few of these countries. But in the eastern part of Europe, you go to Poland, go to the Baltics, you go to Sweden, you go and so on. There it's very much top of the agenda because Russia is next door. And so that's where my belief comes that, of course, Europe has always been an elite project, has always had a huge gap between what happens in Brussels and what happens in the average democracy. To connect the two so that they get somehow aligned, you need the interface of domestic politics. And now that interface is somehow unstable, we will have a bigger challenge. That is clear. And so far, we've managed that challenge. And so I'm positive that with the pressures that we have, we can somehow turn this around and become a bit more proactive again. And that's the theme of the book, how proactive we've become. Another thing, and I really want to emphasize that, because for me, that is probably the most important historically speaking. I think we have to be able to grasp the opportunity of this age that we're now in to really extend the geographic reach of what is Europe in a generic sense. I'm not saying institutionally here or that, and I leave that actually open. And this is one of the lessons also that we have to learn from the past. At some point in the past, we had enlargement fatigue, and we lacked creativity in saying, if it's enlargement fatigue, what else do we do? And can we actually do that in a way that makes progress so that people buy into it on the other end? Rather than we actually going to alienate them by pushing them into a progress that doesn't lead to any concrete results. So I think we have to come up with ways of creating our sphere of influence in a positive way. Given the fact how rogue Russia has become, I think that is an opportunity as well. I'm not very pessimistic vis-à-vis Trump. I think we can make good deals with Donald Trump. I think we have strategically shared interests with the United States. So if we can get our act together and make him a deal, I think things could go rather well, actually. I think Ukraine, I can dwell upon that, but I think we can find a way to convince the United States that what happens in Ukraine is very much a strategic issue for the United States. The axis around Russia, the ramifications if it goes bad. But if we pay for it, then it's a good deal.